Well, folks, this is it. This is the big one. I don't know if this is the grand finale, perhaps, but this is one of the culminations to the Star Wars Re-Examined series. That's right. We are ranking all 11 live-action Star Wars films from worst to best. Hey guys, welcome back to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, and welcome back to Star Wars Re-Examined, to the wrap-up of the series that I've been doing for the past little while now, where I've been looking at all 11 live-action Star Wars films, and looking at how I feel about them now in 2022 and 2023, just trying to drown out all the noise and make sure that I know what I feel about all these films now that I have seen them again. And let's not beat around the bush. Today is my ranking of all 11 of these live-action Star Wars films from worst to best. Now, it's important to remember, before we get into it, that this is my own personal ranking. I have said it time and time again in the separate individual YouTube videos that your rankings and your thoughts on these films are not going to be the same as the person next to you. Why? Because we are all people with unique backgrounds and unique context and upbringings and unique relationships to Star Wars, and that means we are all going to look at these films slightly differently. And because of that, none of our lists are going to look exactly the same. I mean, they might, for sure, but I guarantee that even if they do look the same, they're going to be for different reasons altogether. So, before we get into it further, I just want to make that clear. Just want to make it clear that my list will not be the same as yours, and I'd love to have a discussion about it in the comments down below. Make sure to subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, give this video a like, or don't, but, be kind about it. Don't just dislike the video because you disagree, because that's lame. And let's get into the ranking. All 11 live-action Star Wars films, here we go. Coming in at number 11 is Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones is really just a film that embodies basically everything that I don't like about the prequel trilogy film. I mean, first of all, I have to say, like I said in the review, that the stuff about Jango Fett, the stuff about the clones, stuff about Obi-Wan, I think actually is really quite interesting. I think that all of that stuff lines up together to make this really interesting espionage plot. You have Count Dooku, who is, I don't know, maybe slightly less interesting, but still Christopher Lee plays him really well. And you have this sort of looming threat of Sidious amidst the clones. And then you have Anakin and Padme. And that's where this movie falls apart, because that part of the movie, Anakin and Padme's romance, is some of the worst filmmaking I've ever seen, and just cannot allow me to put Attack of the Clones any higher than number 11. So I'm sorry, Attack of the Clones fans, if you're out there. I don't like sand. I don't like this movie. Sorry. Coming in at number 10 is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Now, unlike Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, The Phantom Menace has some enjoyment value. In fact, it is actually not a terrible watch. That being said, you do have to turn your brain off because, like I've mentioned in the review, this is basically a kid's movie. If you watch it purely as a children's movie, I guarantee you're going to have at least a decent time, because there are the classic tropes of a kid's movie that most adults would just roll their eyes at. But hey, there's flashy visuals. There's the pod racing scene, which is pretty cool. The last duel with Maul with the Duel of the Fates, that's pretty cool. The last scene where they blow up the Trade Federation ship, that's pretty cool. Jar Jar Binks is not really that cool, but I mean, hey, if he's just that comedic side character that kids will love, you kind of just have to look at it in that lens. You can't really look at Attack of the Clones in that same lens because Jar Jar Binks is gone and Anakin is murdering children and men and women and all kinds of sand people. So yeah, that's not great. But anyways, we're talking about the Phantom Menace. So Phantom Menace, if you just kind of look at it as a kid's movie, I think it's more enjoyable than you'd think. Coming in at number 9 is, well, Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. There is a lot to not like about this movie, but there's also the fact that I think from a film perspective, just from an individual film, ignoring Episode 8, ignoring Episode 7, which I know is crazy to think about, but if you just look at Star Wars Episode 9 on its own, it is somewhat watchable because it has an A, B, and C 3-act structure. It goes from Act 1, Act 2 to Act 3. It sets up things that it pays off later on, unlike Episode 7, The Force Awakens, which we'll get to in just a second. But, I mean, there's just so much wrong about this movie from a Star Wars fan's perspective. Palpatine returned? Why? And this movie has more fake deaths than even the MCU. It has Chewbacca fake dying, it has Rey fake dying, it has Kylo Ren fake dying, it has C-3PO fake dying. I mean, I don't know what it is about this movie and just its lack of commitment to anything, and then you have the planet-destroying Star Destroyers again. But again, it's just a film that if you turn your brain off, I guess it's somewhat watchable, but it's still really frustrating as a Star Wars fan for sure. Coming in at number 8 is Solo: A Star Wars Story. This isn't a bad movie, I don't think. It's not incredibly well made, but given the production, all the drama and all that kind of stuff that happened there, I think that it's remarkable that this movie works on its own. But my only real complaint with this movie, and it's a big one, is that this cannot be looked at as a Han Solo movie, especially with how much I loved Harrison Ford as Han Solo in this go-around, in this set of rewatches. I just cannot see Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo. If this movie were called Space Guy or Space Scoundrel, A Star Wars Story, I'd be like, yeah, okay, solid little movie. But the second you try to insert Chewbacca and the Millennium Falcon and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't make the movie work. It actually doesn't elevate the movie. In fact, it sinks the movie a little bit, which is kind of disappointing to me. Again, I think Alden Ehrenreich is a great actor, but just not fit for the role of Han Solo. And it's not his fault either. It's just a bummer. Coming in at number 7 is, well, again, matching, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. I think that The Force Awakens, like The Rise of Skywalker, is very watchable. In fact, it is technically very well made. The action sequences are great. The actors are clearly trying their best. And yeah, I mean, the setup, before you know what happens in 8 and 9, setup is fine. You know, there's a lot of intrigue. There's a lot of mystery here. The problem is really that now that you know that Rey is a Palpatine, and now that you know that there really was no plan and they're just kind of meandering and spinning their wheels, and now that you know that really none of the setup that is set up in this movie is really paid off, it makes The Force Awakens that much more frustrating because all you're left with is a husk of A New Hope. And it's kind of bizarre just how similar this film is to A New Hope, because it is almost a carbon copy. And that's, I mean, how much worse can you get? I guess is the argument of, if you copy A New Hope, like how bad could it be? But then again, it's another frustrating film. It's not a bad film. It's just frustrating. Coming in at number 6 is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. This movie is actually pretty good. There are some moments that have those prequelisms in there, like Anakin and Padme in some scenes, and some really laughable dialogue and some really weird CGI in some certain scenes. But for the most part, Revenge of the Sith actually plays like a very decent Star Wars film. It has the story, it has the stakes, it has the character development, it has those moments like Anakin versus Obi-Wan, it has the birth of Darth Vader. A lot of that really works, actually. The rise of Sidious actually really works. There are some really awkward scenes that seem to jump, like Anakin pledging his allegiance to Darth Sidious, but still, I think that actually if you look at this movie, a lot of it seems to flow pretty nicely. And even if none of that works, well, it's somewhat enjoyable just on an action level alone. Like, there's a ton of lightsaber fights in this film, which is fun. Coming in at number 5 is Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Probably the most controversial pick on my list, but I'm putting The Last Jedi up this high because, well, I like The Last Jedi. I think that for the most part, the film works really well. The beginning is a little rocky, and I think the middle part is as well, but it's really when you get to the end of the film. Like, right from when Rey and Kylo Ren enter the throne room and he kills Snoke, it's from that moment on that this film, the last hour, 15 minutes or so, is some of the best Star Wars I've ever seen. When everyone's on Crate, minus the Finn and Rose kiss, I don't really know what that was about. But again, everything about the last hour of the film, the Holdo maneuver, Luke Skywalker's force projection, and everything that wraps up the ending where the rebellion still has hope, the resistance still has hope, and yet they're on their heels. It's like the best parts of Empire Strikes Back mirrored here. Is it basically a copy in that regard? I mean, sure, there are elements of The Empire Strikes Back that are in this movie, but for the most part, I think that the originality and the execution of the ending really make this film work on a really high level, and I appreciate it for that. Coming in at number 4, another match, actually, which is really bizarre now that I'm looking at it, but Episode 4, A New Hope. This film is just so wonderful to watch because it's so consistently Star Wars, and all those arguments of, hey, it's copying A New Hope, well, this is The New Hope. And it's A New Hope for a reason. It's a good movie. It's a very solid introduction to Star Wars. You get everything you need to know without being bogged down in lore. But when Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan Kenobi mentions the Clone Wars, and when Darth Vader mentions their last encounter, you're left to imagine, you're left to wonder. And yeah, I mean, having seen some of those moments now, does it diminish those moments? Not really, because this movie, it just works on its own. It's standalone. The leads, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill. I mean, Mark Hamill's acting, left me wanting a little bit more. But still, the chemistry between all three of them and the way that this film flows, the final Death Star trench run, nothing about this film is really bad. It's just there are some things that maybe aren't incredible compared to the other two original trilogy films that are later on this list, but still, I really enjoy Episode 4, A New Hope. Coming in at number 3 is Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Now, I actually think that Return of the Jedi is probably a little lower in quality than A New Hope. I think that on a technical level and in terms of story and in terms of character, yeah, there's a lot more in Return of the Jedi that I don't like compared to A New Hope, where there's not a lot that I don't like. But I think that Return of the Jedi just works on a higher level than A New Hope. The ending of Return of the Jedi, it just feels emotional. It packs that punch. And on top of that, the stuff that just kind of doesn't work, like the Ewoks. I mean, the Ewoks are still cute. Like, nothing about this movie isn't entertaining, if that makes sense. You're watching Return of the Jedi, and I just feel this sense of hope and triumph as I go through the movie, which A New Hope you kind of feel, but you also kind of feel the sense of desperation So I think that I enjoy watching Return of the Jedi more than I do A New Hope, and I think that they're close enough in quality that I can put Return of the Jedi just a little bit higher than A New Hope, and that's why it's number 3. Coming in at number 2, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. Yeah, have I mentioned how much I love this movie? Because I love this movie. I will admit the first 15 or so minutes are a little frantic, going back and forth between the characters, going back and forth between the planets, but when the film really hits its stride, when the characters are together on Jeddah, and when they're going to Edu, that's when the film really picks up and it never lets go from that. The ending is so amazing. It is some of the best Star Wars space action and some of the best Star Wars ground action I've seen in a film. I think Rogue One is just the prime example of how you make a modern Star Wars film in today's day and age. And coming in at number 1, really to no one's surprise, not even my own, is Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. The Empire Strikes Back does everything well, and then it takes it up a notch. It takes up the drama, the action, the character development, the dialogue, everything about the stakes of this movie, and everything about the way that it was executed is so well done, and you can tell from the first 5 minutes that this film is just that much better than A New Hope, at least for me. I love the character development of Luke, and his confrontation with Darth Vader just feels that much more meaningful when you watch Empire Strikes Back, Episode 5 of Star Wars. So that was my ranking of all 11 live-action Star Wars films. Let me know what yours is in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what you guys think. And in the meantime, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and let me know what you think of the Star Wars Re-Examined series. Let me know if you've been enjoying it. And thank you guys so much for the support on this video series. It has really meant a lot to me. That's all from me for now, and I'll see you guys in the next one.